African cinema, kind of like a retrospect, what has happened in the past and what we're looking forward to in the future. I want you to introduce yourself though. Just let us know a little bit about you, what you do for African cinema, what is your organization?
Just as you've mentioned, I'm David Kpobi, Ghana, and basically the founder of African Cinema, Anansi Cinema Film Festival. And basically, Anansi Cinema is only 2 years old, and a maiden festival is supposed to happen this year, but due to COVID, we'll have to rearrange or reset a new date for that. And hopefully, we are hoping to bring African filmmakers together with global partners to showcase their creative works in the country, and especially present them to the international front. And in Anansi Cinema, one of our main or core values is to look out for strong family value system in all films that are presented to the festival. Or we cherish the family system that we have as Africans. So hopefully we believe that this family is the nucleus of every community, and whatever happens to the family has a ripple effect in the community. And the community grows to the larger community where we have the entire world. So
forward to. Can you think of any filmmakers in the past that have done that?
Yeah, I can think of, one of our legendary filmmakers, Kawansa in Ghana, who had opportunity actually to study filmmaking abroad under former president, the father of the nation, Kwame Nkrumah. He produced his first film, African Love Brewed in African Port. Love Brewed in African Port, I may say. And you could see the values being portrayed in Love Brewed in African Ports. And as time went on, his compatriot also had an MV, King Apple. King Apple, I believe, had a training in Germany after Kawansa. So he also released the film Ukrantumi. And that film portrays the life of Ghanaians at that time, which also portrays some kind of morality when we talk of morality in that era. So I believe they really shaped the cinema of that era, and that was around 1982 thereabout. So they paved the way. Actually, they paved the way for other films to come on board.
So speaking of Kwame Nkrumah, I find him as such a very interesting, not just political figure, but also creative as well. If you think about all the initiatives he basically established for not just Ghana, but for the leadership of Africa, he was very central in unity. And like you said, he made a film that was centered around unity of the family. And one of the first things he actually established or wanted to establish right away after Ghana was independent was cinemas in Ghana, because he felt that people that were being liberated, us, the Ghanaians that were being, liberated from the British, needed to see images of themselves succeed. They needed to see images of themselves become independent. And that was what he was fighting for. And he believed that when you see that through the cinema, or you see people portraying that, you will believe and you will actually do it. So one of his first initiatives that he put out was actually filmmaking. Can you speak a little bit to that as far as what he really established?
Talking about Kwame Nkrumah's cinema in Ghana, I would want us to go back a bit to African cinema, the genesis of African cinema. Now we could look at the African cinema as an expression of cultural identity in a way. So if you're talking about the cultural identity, we can talk of the cinema in Egypt, the cinema of Egypt. Now, Egyptians, I may say, dates back to the 20th century when film reels were the primary cinematic technology in use. This era, that's when the Egyptians started producing films. And that we can say began somewhere in 1896. Research shows that the cinema of Egypt is one of the oldest cinemas in the world, whereby Augustine and Louis screened their first films in Alexandria and Cairo. It was just a short documentary. So out of that, coming down to 1920, where an individual the private sector brought actually a film to Ghana, the then Gold Coast, opening cinemas in urban areas. So we see that by 1923, thereabout, cinema has become a new form of entertainment. And this new form of entertainment is such that only the affluent could see the films that were exhibited at the cinemas. And these cinemas were for the first class society. That is the colonial masters and their top officials.
Yeah.
So later on, the cinema vans were used in rural areas. You could still remember when they have cinema vans running where they will be announcing and people will be rushing to gather to watch on the large screens. Yeah. That's when I started realizing what was happening, especially these colonial masters were trying to use cinemas to downplay the Africans, the white supremacy of the Africans. And another name that I could say also stood up aside Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, we could say it's a Senegalese filmmaker. Research also shows the same era between 1923 and 2007, Senegalese filmmaker Osman Sembeni, often called the father of African cinema, also came out with some great works of art when it comes to cinema. So we can call a few people aside what Ghanaians have produced in Kawansan, King Apple, and the rest. Down the line, when Kwame Nkrumah established the Ghana Film Industry Corporation at Kanda, I believe in Accra, which became the country's capital in 1977. Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first president of the Republic of Ghana, sent a lot of Ghanaians by then abroad to learn filmmaking. And he did that because he wanted them to go learn, come back, and establish filmmaking in a country so that it will employ to produce more filmmakers in the country. And such names, Reverend Chris AC, Palansan was one of them. Mr. Ernest Abekwe was also one of them, and many others. They were all trained under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah.
So, in your perspective, did you think that was successful as far as sending Ghanaians to go learn filmmaking, come back and teach the rest?
Of Kwame Nkrumah sending them out there to learn and come back and train, he sent them go and learn because of the style of films that were being shown, especially by our colonial masters, trying to use a film to project the image of the white against the image of the blacks. So in a way, they came back and they also realized, we can also produce films that will project our tradition and then promote our cultural values, which in a way they did. We can see that in an independent film by Kawansan, Love Brewed in African Port, which was produced in somewhere 1981. And actually he was the first African to shoot on a celluloid film.
Oh, wow.
And before the road to Kukurantumi was shot the following year. So I could say it was very successful. out of that, we had people like William Akufo, who also decided to adapt the new video technology that was introduced to the world in somewhere 1978 for production of films. No, I remember we could go on and on and on as looking at the genesis of when we were growing as boys. Remember scurrying along some dark corridors of cinema halls with many other children to watch Hindi films, American films, war films, Chinese films, and the rest. And these cinema halls, offered kind of an escape to many children, so that some of whom would definitely be disciplined by their parents that night for neglecting household chores, staying out late, that kind of thing. But the magic of that cinema was simply irresistible. Can you rephrase?
Do you see the future of that? Where do you see the future of African cinema going?
Looking at the future of African films, I would first look at, I remember studying art, we did learn something on industrial revolution. And industrial revolution brought a lot of stuff out to artists at that era. So borrowing Renaissance from industrial revolution, I would also say that we would want to see an African Renaissance. We want to see an African Renaissance in such that, in the sense that Africans seeing Africa and the world through the African lens. One typical movie that I could look at is Beast of No Nation.
Oh.
Remember, Beast of No Nation was shot, Idris Elba, which brought our young kid to the limelight. No, though he lived outside, but because he had his back or origin from Africa, he came down, so he was able to get to the grassroots, get himself acquainted with staffs under the grassroots. So he was able to portray what the system of that time was, what went on. Let's see. So he told the story from the African lens. Unlike us opening up to our partners from Europe, probably just you mentioned, coming home, they want to tell the stories from their own point of view, especially those who will not have the enough time to research. So they might think, oh, we know all about Africa, but that is not the point. Well, now we could talk about the internet revolution. Everything now, it's on the internet. You mentioning back one of your short films, even with, I think I watched one of the movies on your platform, Sweet Face or something.
Sweet Face, yeah, that's a Nigerian film, and it's all both. Where do you see the trend?
For us, it's so difficult having African content on the Western world's platform.
Yes.
So difficult.
I agree.
So difficult. So if Africa on its own, just like that's why I said you are doing a great job with such a platform. If African filmmakers will sit up and realize that no, this is coming from an African, we need to support our own. We will have our works produced, in that quality manner that would want to match a par with those Western films. Then you can also see those films in platforms that was brought up by our own Africans. It's just as it's so difficult to get onto Netflix, so difficult to get onto Amazon, so difficult to get on other platforms. In years to come, it is going to be so difficult for Western films to also get onto platforms such as Kumba and others that are coming up. But one thing that we also have to realize is that we live in a global village. And living in a global village, information, it's across. Live in a global village and in an information-driven period. web of information. You can download anything from anywhere. So we still, but some of us, we still find it difficult, struggling to get access to African films, especially on these streaming platforms. How many of my old men or women in the rural areas will have access to these films to watch on our platforms? They can't, because we do not have internet access in these rural areas. So we have a lot of work to do if we are going to make these VOD platforms beneficial to all those people in these rural areas. So I can say there is a breakthrough for us, especially if you have our own African platform where we have African films being projected.
Perfect. So the vision of Kumba, because you mentioned it, so I just want the audience to know in case they don't have an idea of what Kumba is. The vision of Kumba is to create a platform or an online hub where all of Africans' content would live, right? So what we look for is quality content, not just anything can be placed on Kumba, but as long as it's sharing African values, as long as it's sharing a communal value, as long as it's saying something that is important and relevant to the African narrative, we want that content on Kumba, whether it's animation, whether it's film, whether it's short film, whether it's documentary. The medium doesn't matter. The content is what matters. So we're curating a place where all of Africa can basically live online. And our vision for that is also to pay filmmakers as people are consuming their content. And then our vision for that is also to...
I didn't.
Okay. So I don't know why you're laughing. Okay. So as far as content creation, most of the African films that I have watched in the last 5 years or so, I can predict the end from the beginning, right? The originality is not there. The storylines tend to be very basic. Characters are not developed. Can you speak to like why we're seeing this? Like,
you know, for Ghanaian filmmakers, I may say there has to be a paradigm shift from what we know, from the olden days, and then step up our game a little bit. Step up our games in creativity. We got to be creative in ways of projecting our storyline. We got to be creative handling of equipment. We got to be creative when it comes to developing of characters. And we should eschew hashing stories. That is the main problem. You pick someone's story and then translate or produce the same thing with just a little twist. This is a saying, once you start a Ghanaian movie, back 4 or 5 years ago, you can predict the end as well as start. So we don't have that twist, that, should I say, for lack of words, so we don't have that kind of, oh, come on.
I know what you mean.
I just used it.
It's very predictable.
Yeah, you can
tends to be very
predictable, but it's so much vague. No, the story is not much weighty. It's not. It does not carry weight. It does not carry weight. You can just see through whatever is going to happen. Which we should move away from that. We should be able to run around.
So how do we do that? How do we move away from that? How does African cinema move away from being predictable?
I think it's
Nollywood. Nollywood is very predictable. How do they move away from that?
I think it's time we put on our thinking cap, put on the creativity cap. So I will create out of the little that we have. People can create out of nothing. If others are creating stories out of nothing, we have a lot of stories around us. When you come to the home on its own, we have a lot of stories that goes on in the home. But how do we portray that? The kind of stories as a filmmaker that I would want to produce will be in line of probably my experiences. my experience will be different from your experience.
Mm-hmm.
We experience different things at a particular point in a person's life. So if I'm able to portray that onto the screen, translate it onto the screen, it should be different from what others will portraying.
So
Someone
just
sitting,
be authentic. That's what you're saying. Be authentic to you, to your
yeah,
experiences.
exactly. Somebody somewhere should be able to see his or her life in whatever I am portraying. You see, there should be a link there.
Mm.
But if it's always like, okay, this person has produced this movie and it was a hit in his country, it was a hit on the other continent, maybe I can bring it back here. I'll pick the same story and produce it without, I mean, changing certain things in it, but I'll produce exactly the same thing. 4 or 5 years down the line, as you mentioned, there was a film which I won't mention the title, which was, I mean, totally 100% hashed from a South African project.
Mm.
You see, it was produced just like that. You could see scene by scene, you can count
Mm.
it. And
Mm.
with that, it's killing the industry. It has killed the industry, honestly. But I believe that there's still a chance out there for us if we are able to create more of our own stories. Go back to our olden days. We have a lot of stories that we can fall on, which has a lot of moral values. We are back to the morality again, which has a
Mm.
lot of moral values that we can tell in this era. Just as you mentioned, how did our olden cinema affected the current cinema that we have? Bring stories up from the olden days, make use of those stories, then reproduce them.
Okay. So my last question, and you kind of actually answered some of it right now with what you just said, but what are the things from the past that we need to implement today in today's African cinema? What are the takeaways from the past that we should integrate into what we're doing today in African cinema? And I think you mentioned some of it, but if you have more to expand, please do.
Yeah, I strictly going to say producing works or reproducing works from the past, learning from what they have done. You know, our values are gone because we
Mm.
live in a global village. We have been so much indoctrinated.
Mm.
We have so much that anything Western is good,
Mm.
anything African is bad. So we try to shy away from the stories that our great grandfathers told us. Why did I use the name Anansi? And I picked Anansi because I said, no, when I was growing up, we used to watch films or even drama by the
Yeah.
fireside where
Mm-hmm.
they will folk tales, where they will portray Anansi as
Yep.
the wisest person. So Anansi is an embodiment of knowledge, creativity, morality, that kind. So if I go back to look at those stories, I should be able to translate those stories in this modern era,
Mm.
pull out those values, put them in the stories that I am writing at this stage and send them out there. The stories would have to portray, the stories will have to teach good moral values to people who ever watch those movies.
David, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It's really been a pleasure speaking to you, and all the knowledge from the past cinema and all the things we can do in today's time to elevate our cinema, and just your experiences that you shared. I really appreciate it. Whoever is listening, I'm sure will learn so much.
This project is putting up a village, a film village. Actually, I'm building a set for a comedy show. So
Okay.
that's what we are working on right now, building a set for that comedy show. And
Okay.
watch out, Kumba Media.
I know. I was about to say, is it gonna be on Kumba? Because if it's not, I'm not gonna invite you back on
It
here.
will be there. It
It
will be
will be
there.
on Kumba. Okay, David. Thank
Now
you.
I believe I am going to produce works that suits your taste.
Oh, it's
Yes, I
it's
have
really
to.
nice. It's really not about my taste, but like you said, it's about building morality and telling our
Exactly.
stories in our community. And as
Yeah.
long as we can add more stories like that into the libraries of content, because honestly, if you think about it, Kumba is not for us. It is
Yeah.
for people 15 years from now. It is for people 20 years from
Exactly.
now.
From
It is for
now.
the next generation to see, you know what, my grandparents, my great grandparents had
Sure.
stories, right?
Sure.
It wasn't.
Before you leave, one more thing that Anansi Cinema is doing, for the past 2 years, we have identified 10 young ladies, 10 young ladies, and we have trained them for the past 2 years. We are still training them. Probably by November, they should be able to graduate. So each of those young ladies will produce a short film on their own. And they were trained by female filmmakers all over, some from Kenya, some from Tanzania, and then in the US.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So this is a major project we are doing. Watch out for this 10 beautiful young women.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for highlighting women, because in
You're
this
welcome.
industry, you don't
I
really see
know.
a lot. I mean, we have some powerful women in the
Yeah, we
industry,
do.
but it's few and far in between. So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you for the opportunity.
thank you, David. I'll talk to you soon.
Right. Have a nice day and keep up
Thank
the good
you.
work.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.